All right. What do we think about creating your own rudiments out of a string of rudiments? So like, this is a paradiddle flam herta chop.
Good question.
Like,
I mean,
or when people give them weird names, where they're just like, this is a paraflam.
Cheese-a-diddle flam, whatever. Yeah.
This is a fast one.
Okay. So, God, this is like such a wormhole. I'm trying to think of how to say it the right way. So there are some translation problems between certain languages because there are some languages where we have a word for, or okay, let's say it this way. You are wearing a like teal colored men's t-shirt.
Sure.
Right? So that would be like 3 words. Teal men's t-shirt, right? But in certain languages there can be a word where it's one word and it actually contains all 3 of those pieces of information.
Correct.
In the word, right?
Yeah.
So like unpacking it can be a little bit tricky. So with this sort of stuff, it's like if you have 3 rudiments and you string them together and give it a new name, like does that help you? Like are you is it like a shortcut to say the cheesy flamadiddle like over under, or you could just be like it's a 6-stroke roll and a paradiddle diddle with 2 kicks at the end. Right? Like, I don't know that there's like any advantage to like renaming it and calling it something totally new. I don't know why you'd necessarily do that because the language and the words already pretty much exist.
Yeah.
But this is a weird, like, I have no doubt that all patterns have been played at some point. Let's just say under 16 notes or something, right? Like all of those patterns between all your limbs, they have been played before. But when you look at the list of rudiments, like, is that all of them? Like, there's got to be some variations that we don't recognize as actual rudiments. And why is that? Is it that they don't sound good? Probably they don't sound good.
Well, yeah, or they're in a subdivision so small, like 64th notes.
Well,
that it's like, why
but
even
rudiments
count
don't,
that?
Well, rudiments don't quite come with subdivision, right? You use the subdivision to play them, but
okay,
you could
okay,
play
yeah, I know
you
what
could
you
play
mean.
64th notes and use any rudiment, right? I think one thing that's a limiting factor is length. Like you're not going to have the 29-stroke roll because it's just silly. Like we get it. You wouldn't keep going. Otherwise, there would be infinite rudiments. You would have the 2 billion stroke roll. Like there's just no reason to go that. At a certain point, you stop counting.
Yeah, at 5.
Yeah. But then there's, man, I really need like a history lesson in this. There are some things that are recognized patterns that we don't call rudiments. Right? So like right, left, left. That's a really common 5-note grouping. If you combine it with kicks, it's used for all different styles of music. I play it all the time. But that's not a rudiment. Why, like who made up those rules and how long ago? I'm guessing this was around like 200 something years ago in snare drum territory. But I don't know. Has anyone ever like come up with an alternate group of patterns that'd be like, no, it's like a different way to map out the language? I don't know.
I don't think we're going to get into that territory until we have like third arms.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
it's all mathematically limited by how many limbs you have. Yeah, there's only so many you could do, and we have definitely played all of them.
Yeah,
it's just like the naming and organizing them part. I don't know who made the executive decision on what is classified as like an official rudiment, what makes a hybrid rudiment. It's just like not on the original list.
Yeah.
That's why it's a hybrid.
It's just like generally accepted. It's not like there's a committee of people that are like approving and disapproving new rudiments to use.
Right? It's so unofficial. Then there's also rudiments with subdivision changes, but if that's allowed, like hertas, that's considered a hybrid rudiment, I think.
Yeah.
And it's African, so it's like tied to a culture, but so it's got a different history to it. But like if subdivision changes are on the table, then infinitely more rudiments could be created, right? You could come up with tons of them if I'm allowed to change the subdivision. Like that does not apply to all the traditional ones, I don't think. I don't think you're allowed to change subdivision in the middle. But hertas are 16th notes and 30 seconds combined. I mean, respectively, depends on how you look at it. But that's what I mean. This is a wormhole. I don't know.
Well, how about this? If we're talking about giving it a pass or a fail, an accent or a ghost, we say creating your own rudiments out of a string of rudiments. kind of like if you're just like, here's a lesson on this thing, and it's just a string of rudiments that maybe has a different name already, or like they think that it's new, but it's not really an original concept. Like,
Well-
how would you gauge that? I mean, it doesn't seem fair to me to just be like, here's a flamacue. Like, this is a lesson that's official that like we should be coined for and everything like that. Not to like throw anybody under the bus or anything, but like, you know, it's like, well, okay.
Well, okay, so-
somebody would have figured that out with like a general amount of knowledge after
Yeah.
a while.
So I would give it the overall accent, because what you're really doing is just combining patterns, which is a huge part of the exploratory nature of playing drums. Like finding two things that you learned from, let's just say, two different YouTube teachers, and then combining them for your own thing. Like, that's a weird 2021 example, but like stuff like that, right? Or a groove that you got from one album combined with a feel that you got from another album with a different drummer. Like that sort of stuff, it's a really important part of the creative process. A lot of times you do this anyway. Your brain likes melting together different ideas. But doing that intentionally, even if it's just picking two rudiments off of a chart and being like, I'm going to mix these together and see what happens, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
It has a high potential for wasting your time, because a lot of things do not sound good. Just be like, let me spend 4 hours playing like this rudiment into this rudiment, and you figure out at the end like, oh, that actually isn't that cool, and I don't. But sometimes you can find like gold in those. It just depends on what it is, but it's probably worth your time to have that exploratory practice that way, just combining two things. I don't know. I almost look at it as like, if the language analogy holds true, you might not want to give that advice to someone who's like learning to speak English. Like, listen, you should just take a bunch of random words and smash them together and see what happens. Like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. You need a little bit of intention here. But eventually you would want to be like playfully creative in your mind with all the words that you know.
Right,
You
yeah.
would eventually, but you want to have like a little bit of a strategy. That's the way to say it. You should have some version of a strategy when you're doing that. Like, I want to make a cohesive, smooth, maybe an aggressive 16th note fill. How could I do that? So have like a premise first, instead of just being like this one and this one and this one, and it's a cheese deal. Like, you're not gonna get that lucky, I don't think. But that's a funny one, man. That's cool. I like that. So I'll give it the accent. It's worth your time doing. Just have a little bit of a strategy when you do that. Thanks for watching this clip from the Orlando Drummer Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure you did. It was an absolutely fantastic clip. And if you're looking for more content, sort of like this, but a lot more in-depth, you're formally invited to come check out my online drum school at the link in the description. You can start a free 7-day trial and access all 160 hours of content that's there. It's a lot. Trust me. Check it out. Link in description.